Dirty Birds, what's up? We've got a new edition of Falcons Final Whistle. I am your host, Will McFadden. I'm joined by Tori, McElhaney, and filling in for Taryn Walk, we've got Amna, Subhan, and we are going to be breaking down an awesome, exciting second day of camp. So Falcons Final Whistle here, presented by Zaxby's. Amna, I want to start with you. What was kind of your big feeling of the difference between Thursday's practice and Friday's practice?
Yeah, I mean, I listened to it yesterday. Yes, I heard Tori say it was boring, and it kind of was. And yeah, today was
Thank you.
It was a very stark difference. You felt it. I mean, passes were thrown. That was fun.
Passes were thrown.
So the energy was just different, and I mean, the country music was going. It was a nice vibe.
Yeah, we talk about this stark difference. It really, truly did feel very, very different in terms of the level of intensity that they were going as well. Even when they were in 11-on-11s, it wasn't, I mean, they're not going 110%. They're probably going 60-70. No tackling, no contact, not any of that kind of stuff. But there was a different speed of which they were playing. And and there was a bit more like bumping and running, which is always so exciting. Mm-hmm. How funny is it that we're just like, oh, someone bumped into somebody. Like, this is so exciting. But it really did feel, you felt the intensity rise a little bit, and it was this very stark difference between one day to the next, even though it's only been 24 hours.
Yeah, I almost feel like I did a poor job of introing this podcast and setting the table first, so I want to pull us back because I feel like the three of us need to collectively come together and do the fans justice because, it really does stink that the fan base can't be here for this training camp. But today especially felt like a day where you would have really felt kind of the crowd feeding off of the plays that were being made out there. And, a couple of players have said, they're looking forward to getting out in front of fans at Seconder High School on Saturday. Come out if you guys want to see the Falcons in person, and then later on at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium practice, because the energy is really palpable. And today was a day that really, I think, would have been exciting and felt like football is back. So we got to bring our A game here. We got to do it justice. But Tori, let's talk a little bit more about the passing game. Kind of what caught your eye, and when did it begin to feel for you that this is a day where things are kind of clicking?
Yeah, so it was pretty early on. They spent the first kind of hour of practice doing some more individual work, which was something that they did not do the first day of camp, which is, when you think of training camp, when you think of the dog days of camp, you think of indie work. And so the fact that we didn't even get that on day one it made today feel more like a camp practice to kind of what you're talking about. But when they started getting into some 11-on-11 work and some full team stuff, and they're running through these plays and they're doing these different formations and motions and screens, and you're actually getting Kirk Cousins leaning back on that leg and tossing the ball down to Ray McLeod for a touchdown. I mean, that was that was the most exciting moment of camp. Was that one? It was probably halfway through when it was probably a 40-yard pass.
Yeah.
That he just aired out perfect right in Ray McLeod's arms. I mean, it was the moment that I think defined the day.
Yeah. Because
you could see things were working for this. I guess when you're talking about Kirk Cousins and the receivers and the tight ends, and there weren't that many. I'll say this too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt to me that there weren't a lot of batted down balls. There weren't a lot of misses, really true big misses. Everything felt very clean and accurate.
There were, I will say, I think 2 back-to-back plays where it did look like the ball got away from Michael Penix a little bit. And there was one that, Amna, you kind of came to me and you were like, what was that? And they weren't on the 11-on-11. It was more, I think, when they were working quarterbacks and receivers. But no, actually, I take that back. The defense was out there because Penix on the one I'm thinking of specifically was kind of holding the defense, and then almost too late in the thing kind of went and started throwing it almost like a no-look kind of deal, and the ball got a little wide on him. So there were a couple of things, but no, you're totally right. By and large, it was long handoffs all day long.
Right, and it was very much not necessarily what I feel like I've been used to seeing the last couple of years, and I'm trying not to knock anybody, but I can't get over the fact of how clean it felt and how efficient it felt, and that matters when we're talking about what this offense wants to be and kind of what the overall expectations for this offense is, you expect them to throw the ball. You put that much money into the quarterback position. You put that kind of draft capital into the quarterback position. You rebuild this wide receiver room. And I really did like to see also how some of these receivers, their roles today, felt like there was more of a role carved out for them. I think about Rondell Moore. I think Darnell Mooney. Ray McLeod. Like, even Casey Washington, he got some work in with Kirk Cousins and the ones. And those guys, we know what Drake London's going to be. We know what Kyle Pitts is going to be. It was these new faces. And to see kind of where they were motioning, how they were motioning, what type of routes they were running, what type of spacing there was, that to me was on full display today in a way that it wasn't yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you definitely saw that. I mean, we were talking about how, like, the offense shouldn't look this sharp, like, on day 2 of training camp. And yeah, I mean, to harp on your point, like, all the receivers really, you felt them. Like, you saw Darnell make a move. You saw Rondell from Michael Penix. And it's just like, yeah, like, you felt it all clicking. And it's still just so early.
Right, yeah.
My favorite thing, though, when you talk about the wide receivers, and I want to include Kyle Pitts in that conversation, too, because he had a beautiful little, like, double move where I kind of, like, looked away for 1 second and looked back, and he was wide open, and there was just, like, nobody near him. And then I was like, who was even covering on that play? Because it was just such a subtle, beautiful thing. But this group of pass catchers, I think, is going to be really helped out by the coaching staff. And that's not necessarily a slight against the previous regime, but the passing game, and we've talked about this before on this podcast, the spacing always left me, wanting a little bit more. And today you could, I think this is going to what you said about the clearly kind of defined roles, is you knew where kind of like each person was going to be, and they weren't anywhere near somebody else. Like, they were not on top of one another. There were really purposeful motions. I mean, I got so excited today seeing during the individual drills, they had a portion where instead of just lining up at the line of scrimmage like a normal thing, they were literally kind of like motioning out and starting up, and it looked like arena football. And you can just feel the influence of kind of the Los Angeles offense, but the extension, the tree that Sean McVay has created. All those guys are building off of each other, whether it's, Matt LaFleur or Mike McDaniel or Sean McVay himself, like, they're all iterating, and it's so much fun to watch.
And to that one drill that you're talking about, too, I thought it was interesting because you had Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix that were side by side, receivers are running their routes, whatever. But every single time, in order to cue the motion, it was Kirk. Doing his little arms out every single time. It wasn't anybody else.
Like a conductor.
Every single time. Even if, like, even though Michael Penix is kind of standing there too, it was Kirk. Like, everything is running through Kirk as it should. And that was something that I wrote about yesterday that I felt like was even reinforced today when you did see more of this air out and being able to see these completion of routes. And I mean, to hear also a whole conversation about spacing and to connect it to what I wrote in the offseason about what Darnell Mooney said about how there's no one in your way. If you're one-on-one, it's truly one-on-one. You're out there on an island with your corner or with your DB. So that, to me, is such a breath of fresh air to a certain extent. And again, I try not to like knock on anybody or like that, but you just saw kind of how starkly different it was.
Every offense is going to have its things that it prioritizes and emphasizes, and it always felt like the run game was where that the Falcons offense really was like exceptional. So,
and it was successful.
Yes, and it was, right. So again, like I think that both things can be true at the same time. But speaking of Kirk, did you guys see there was a moment when they were doing the red zone period where he kind of like instinctually, and this is a great sign, I think, that he wasn't even thinking about this, but he stepped up in the pocket and then stepped out and ran.
Yes.
And he actually like ran like 5 yards up the field, and it was maybe the loudest collective breath hold I've ever heard. It was just kind of like, up. All right, he's good.
He's
cool.
fine. He's fine.
We're all good. So again, I that's a great sign. The fact that Grady Jarrett, yesterday was saying that in the spring when he started feeling like, okay, I can sprint now, I can start making some cuts, and I'm trusting this. Imagine where I'm going to be in 2 months. That Kirk is kind of already doing these things, and it's like, imagine where he's going to be in a month and a half when the season actually is here. Like, he already looks great. So I like today was such a positive sign, I think, for so many different reasons. But I want to pivot a little bit and talk about Raheem and just kind of the shape and the texture of what this camp has looked like so far, because it's been very different to my experience. Amna, you saw camp last year, so this is your second camp. I mean, does it feel similar to what you experienced the first time around? Have you been able to tell any clear differences?
Yeah, I mean, even from a personal standpoint, obviously, and I think that goes for rookies too, where they're probably feeling more comfortable and the game is slowing down and they're understanding things more. But just the fact that they're doing jog throughs before they start warming up, and yesterday was so different than anything I've ever seen from any practice, and it just feels like there's a lot of intentionality there, and that's something that Kirk has talked a lot about, and you just feel that building, and that's something I didn't really feel last year.
There was something that I think it was caught by either our video team or our social team, and I believe they put it on Twitter, and it's this moment with Bajan and Carlos Washington.
Oh, the little dance?
Yes, and
That's
Bajan is doing this little shoulder dancey thing, and Carlos is wiping his shoulders, and it was a very goofy moment, and it was a very human moment, and it showed to me that there is an element of fun to this. And they kind of have to bring this team right now, because of the nature of this camp where fans aren't there. They have to bring their own energy and intensity and fun and drive. They have to supply that themselves. It's not going to come from anywhere else. There are no external factors right now at this specific training camp to get their blood pumping outside of what they're doing.
Yeah.
So to see, Bajan Robinson have his helmet off, and I know he smiles all the time. That's just who Bajan is. But I don't remember seeing him that free and fun and even to a certain extent joyful at a training camp practice last year. And obviously they're doing their work. They're in meetings all the time. They're watching a ton of film. They're having these really tough conversations about what scheme it is and what identity they're going to have. I mean, there is obvious work being done. But when they're out on the field, there is just this level of energy that I feel is very palpable in, honestly, what's crazy is any of the training camps that I've covered. And that includes, I've seen training camps during COVID where there weren't fans. I've seen training camps
and that was a Dan Quinn training camp.
Exactly.
Too. Yeah.
So this energy is very, to Amna's point, it's very palpable. And also, I think you have to give kind of credit where credit is due, where Raheem has created this bubble almost that allows these players to find ways to hype themselves up.
And there was, I think, a perfect example of kind of that bubble that he creates where, on the one hand, he has been clear that the stamp he wants to maybe put on this team and this culture and this organization is the relationship building. He wants everybody that is a member of the Atlanta Falcons to be very connected, to, kind of almost bring that out so that you want to fight and play and work harder for one another. And so I think that is part of the joy and just the energy that you're feeling in camp. But specifically, Michael Penix had an amazing pass kind of down the left-hand sideline that was a nice little deep ball that hit Rondale Moore in stride, and Rondale kind of bobbled it and it ultimately couldn't haul it in. And so then he came over to the sideline, and the media was right there on the sideline as they were going up and down the field. It was one of the more fun aspects, I think, of the day because the players were right there. But Raheem kind of came over, and I'm not going to give too much of the conversation away, but basically he was kind of jokingly blaming it on Ike Hilliard, the wide receivers coach. And he was just Rondale, it's more your coach's fault. He's not doing a good enough job. And then was Bajan, we're going to make him the running backs coach because, all of that stuff. And I was just man, that is so smart because that is still Raheem being able to be himself and be kind of a joking, sarcastic, wisecracking, impish dude. And at the same time, kind of work with somebody in Ike Hilliard who's going to be able to play along with that, who's not going to take any of that personally. He's I know, I get what you're doing. But for Rondale, it lightens the moment, it creates some levity, and it maybe helps him move on a little bit. So I thought that was just such a cool moment and example to see how Raheem is such a one of one, and he is so himself, but even his personality type can coach at such a high level because he knows exactly what he's trying to do and he is true to himself. And And I just feel like these two practices, they've been interesting, but they've been reflections of, I think, the different parts of his personality.
Yeah. And we've heard from a lot of players just how he's able to be that jokester, but also like knows how to turn it on and get the best out of you.
Yeah.
And it's nice to kind of see that play out a little bit in training camp. And I'm sure just throughout the season, we're going to see that. Like, everybody just raves about Raheem, but to see it now translate is really fun.
So I'm actually really curious, Will, because I saw you after practice. You were talking to Justin Hood, who's the secondaries coach, for a little bit. And something I find so fascinating about the way this coaching staff is constructed is how many guys in the defensive staff, Raheem honestly included, who have been DB coaches at some point in their history. Of Jerry Gray, of Jimmy Lake, you have Raheem Morris, Justin Hood. All of these guys have significant experience coaching a secondary. And honestly, Jerry Gray playing in the secondary. But I'm really curious kind of what your conversation was like with Justin Hood as y'all are maybe even talking about this infusion of the mind at this point in time in the install.
I mean, it's clear that Justin has, because I kind of walked over on the tail end of another conversation when he was talking more about the players, and he was very sharp. He knew exactly like all the skill sets of the guys that he's working with, what they do well, what they don't. Like, he gave a great answer about Richie Grant and his versatility, and I think that Justin himself is a really, really smart guy. But what I loved was that he was like, man, when Raheem is talking about the secondary or Jerry Gray is up there talking, like, I've got my pen and paper out as well, and I'm taking notes and I'm learning. So it's very clear that he recognizes the kind of like opportunity that he's in, and it's one of the reasons where if you look at the way that the Falcons constructed this roster, and a lot of us have come in saying if it's not the number one kind of question, it's definitely number two, is like the number two corner, right? And I wonder if the Falcons are kind of, again, betting on themselves as a coaching staff, but also if you look at the guys that are both competing for that spot, but everybody else in the secondary, this is a group that's coming back. Yeah. This is a group where there is a higher level of communication. I was talking to Mike Hughes and AJ Terrell yesterday and asking them about the communication level in the secondary, and they were like, it's great so far, and I think that's going to be a vital part of this defense. So Justin is going to have a huge role in the implementation of that. But I think when you look at what the Falcons are going to be in the secondary in particular, and maybe the way that they can change their identity week to week, do different coverages, it's going to be because of the versatility of their players, but the brain trust and being able to go to Jerry Gray and say, hey, you saw this back when, like, what did you guys do is the answer. It's going to be a kind of a grab bag of really cool, interesting things.
Yeah, and one more note I'll make on the secondary. I know a lot of people that we on this podcast talked a lot about that cornerback across from AJ Terrell, like who it was going to be. We're 2 days into this, and I'm obviously not going to call anything.
Is this a battle lines? Are we doing a battle line segment?
This is a battle line segment.
Battle lines report.
I really see over the last 2 days, Mike Hughes is getting a lot of opportunities as the guy starting opposite AJ Terrell, which I think is very interesting. We are seeing a lot of Mike Hughes running with the ones, running with that first secondary. We're seeing a lot of Richie Grant alongside Jesse Bates. I know that we've kind of been saying over the course of this offseason, like the competition in the secondary was between, Mike Hughes and Clark Phillips, and then DeMarco Helms and Richie Grant, and that all may still be the case, but so far early, those are the two that are working most closely with the ones.
You wrote a really good piece, coming out of minicamp on the battle with Clark Phillips and Mike Hughes. Are you a little surprised to see that Mike Hughes is taking the reins here?
Not really. He was, like, at the start of OTAs, he was getting those reps, and then you saw Clark in there a little bit, and he stepped up, and Raheem had some great things to say about him, but, like, they initially went with Mike Hughes, and for that, to the point of talking about Justin Hood, when I talked to him for the first time, I was like, is there anyone who stood out to you when you first got into this room? And he said, Mike Hughes. He knows ball.
Okay.
He knows ball, and you forget how long he's been in the league.
Like, you do, because of all the injuries that he's had to go through,
Like, he's a vet, and he knows how to get it done.
Yeah.
And I also can't help but think about, like, how much leadership there is about the DBs and, like, handling the dynamics of that when there are those battle positions.
Yep.
And, like, both Clark and Mike were just like, you know what? I'm going to do what I got to do, and whatever happens, happens. But, like, I'm going to do whatever I can for this team.
Don't you think, too, with like Mike Hughes, that it's almost there's a chip on his shoulder almost because of the nature of how long he's been in the league and how significant his injuries were and how little time he had very early on to see the field because he was medically unable to do so. I almost wonder if he's kind of looking at this because this is the second year of a 2-year deal for him. If he's looking at this as like, this year could potentially be make or break for me, according to what type of player I want to continue to be. So maybe there's a little bit of fire in that, and it makes it very, very interesting. And I will be very curious to see how much, if any, rotation and movement there is in that spot.
But yes, I agree. And I like what you said about the, when we were listening to what Justin Hood is saying, it's he knows ball. It's Richie Grant can play multiple roles. I'm telling you, the intelligence level is going to be such a factor, I think, for the secondary, and it's why when you've got a player like Jesse Bates back there, it's why Richie Grant and his multifaceted game, it's maybe why a veteran like Mike Hughes gets a nod over a second-year player. No shots at Clark Phillips. Like, I'm really optimistic about his career, but I expect a lot of rotation. I expect a lot of different coverages. So that's really exciting. But let's go ahead and start kind of wrapping this thing up, and I want to move on to our camp champ. So again, it was such a fun and exciting practice today. We had a lot of options. This is definitely
hard to decide.
Tougher decision. So Tori, let's start with you. Who you got to nominate?
So I know we've been talking a lot about receivers and Kirk and the offense, and I have to stay in that lane because my camp champ for the day, or my nomination for camp champ for today, is Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore is someone who I have been very intrigued to see, especially understanding how Zach Robinson would want to use him specifically. He's very small, very compact, very, very quick. And you knew he was quick. I went back when he was first signed with the Falcons back in March, and he was somebody that you watch film on. You can see how quick he is. You see kind of him as a return man. You go back and you watch his Combine 40 and you see him running a sub 4.4. Like, this is someone who very obviously is quick. To actually see him in person and to feel speed is something entirely different. That's something that I think people at home, I would want to, like, that's why I love it when y'all are able to come and see in person, because I can't remember who it was, but it was some scout at some point was like, when you can feel speed, you know it's different. And that is something that when you can feel the speed of Rondale Moore. When he really kicks it into another gear, you take notice of it. And I did today, especially in how they were using it and how they were best utilizing that speed. And the thing is, what's hilarious is I'm talking about his speed, and I'm talking about how fun it was to watch him operate, whether he was with Michael Penix or with Kirk Cousins. And we are 2 days into camp, and they're not running 100%.
Yeah.
What type of game speed does he have? Like, this practice speed is one thing. Game speed is something else entirely. And so I'm very intrigued by him. I'm very excited about him.
I'm so quietly optimistic for Rondale Moore. I just feel like we haven't talked enough about him. Right. I agree with you. I saw it as well. That was a great case. Amna, who you got as camp champ? Who are you nominating?
It was a little hard to decide, like I said, but I'm going with Michael Penix Jr.
Love it.
I know. And in the beginning of practice, I was like, yes, for sure. And for context, for a lot of the practice, there was a lot of rotation, but they did a lot of 1 versus 2s. So Michael Penix on the second team was going against the defense of 1s. There was Jesse Bates, AJ Terrell, and he was making plays, and he looked good for a good amount of practice. He also looked like a rookie at times, which made me be like, okay, maybe not. But talking to him after, he was just like, I love football. I want to play against the 1s as much as possible. I want to, go against a Jesse Bates at safety and and have that challenge. So I really like that from him. And also the fact that it was so hot.
It was very hot.
It was extraordinarily hot. But this kid is from Florida, and during his press conference, it reached a whole level of hot, and he was just standing there in all black and spandex and black socks, and I'm like,
couldn't be me.
I know the exact moment that you're talking about, too.
Something
when
shifted.
The sun literally just was like, all right, you know what? Now we're cranking it up to 11. It's like the oven finished preheating.
Yeah. I was like, why are we still asking questions? Can we wrap this up?
I kind of gave a glance at Matt Haley, and I was just like, all right, dude, are we at last question yet? But multiple reporters were doing that. That's how insanely hot it got immediately. Yeah, it's a real thing. That's a great point on the and yeah, I thought I thought this was a really solid day for Michael Penix. Like, he looked in command.
He also has just, like, such a zip on the ball. You know, he really does. I know we were talking about it at one point, like, or maybe it was Ryan Delgado that I was talking about, who's on our social team, but you just watch him throw the ball, and it's coming at you. Like, I made this analogy. I was like, okay, you know, in baseball, when a guy really gets a hold of it, and it's like, it's a line drive, and it's never going to stop going.
Yeah.
Unless someone gets in front of it. It's just going to continue going forever and ever. That's kind of sometimes how, when Michael Penix Jr. throws the ball, that's sometimes how I feel, that it is getting on these receivers very quickly. And again, I go back to this whole thing of like actually seeing these things in person. You can watch it on film all day long. To actually see it, it's a different beast entirely.
You understand why they went to his pro day and they were just like, oh, yeah,
right,
all right, we got it. We can see this guy. Yeah. So, I mean, again, Penix was awesome. My pick is Kirk Cousins, the other quarterback. For the other quarterback, quarterback. If people didn't know who Kirk Cousins was, now they do. For as much clear, like, kind of arm talent as Michael Penix has, there were some moments where the polish between the two, the 12, 13-year veteran and then the rookie, was kind of apparent. You know, when they're doing some of the more basic quarterback drills, Kirk's was like on the money, same spot every single time. And then you see that translate over to the 11-on-11s. And even with, Arnold Ebiketie had a really nice pass rush that in a game may have been a sack. I may have given the point to Arnold there, but Kirk still got the ball out. It was a little bit wobbly, but it was right on the money. It was like right there. So it's almost like a golfer who may not be the furthest driver, but is just hitting it right in the middle of the fairway every single time. That's Kirk Cousins, and that is why I'm so optimistic for what this passing game can be. It's not because he's Patrick Mahomes and going to throw it 80 yards. It's because he's just going to probably be like 72% and get the ball on time to where it needs to be, and then let these really young, talented playmakers and Rondale Moore with his freaking roadrunner speed just like do the rest. And that's kind of all this Falcons offense I think has been missing, and it's really why I'm high on it this year.
I mean, it's exactly what Kirk Cousins said his very first introductory press conference was about being the point guard and just getting the ball in the hands of these guys. And it's interesting too because you talk about his accuracy, and that play that we were talking about earlier it was the touchdown pass to Ray McLeod. That couldn't have been placed any better. I mean, Ray McLeod is on the back hip of the DB in coverage, and it wasn't bad coverage.
No, it was right where you'd want to be.
Exactly. Yeah. He was right where able to make a play on it. Like, I mean,
as coaches would say, you just tip your cap and move on.
Right, yeah, you had to, because it was a perfectly placed ball.
Yep.
And that's so nice to see.
All right, so this is going to be the first time we've had to actually break down and figure out how we're going to decide on who the camp champ is.
Okay.
Did anybody's mind change based on the argument? Does anybody?
I feel like I got Amna on mine.
You know what? She did.
Yes.
So we're going Rondale Moore.
I knew it.
Well, the thing is, like, the wide receivers stuck out to me, like Darnell and Rondale.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love that their
agree.
names rhyme.
Darnell, Rondale, Ray.
It's going to be hard.
They were great, yeah, and like seeing Ray get out there too.
You're right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I got to tip my cap to Tori.
Let's go.
I love that. Rondale Moore
I'm 2 for 2 on my camp champ nominations. Because I had Grady yesterday, and now I have Rondale today.
Who did I? Oh, I had James Smith-Williams yesterday, who was also still out there with the one.
He is.
He was still out there, so we're keeping an eye on that. But
JSW.
That's my new nickname for him.
All right, so congratulations to Rondale Moore. So we've got Grady Jarrett at 1, Rondale Moore at 1. Those are the 2 camp champ winners so far. So that is going to do it for us today. A reminder, everybody, Saturday, Second-Year High School. The Falcons will be out there. Fans can come, 5:30, I believe the gates open. Get out there, be loud. It's going to be a really, really fun time. It's going to be exciting. Please like and subscribe. You can check us out on YouTube. We are going to be going after every single training camp practice. So if you've got friends who are Falcons fans, family members who are Falcons fans, send it over to them. If you like this one, go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you want to turn on the alerts, you'll get notified every single time we have a new app or a new episode come out. So you won't even have to go looking for us. So please follow us, support us if you can. I'm really excited about what this podcast is going to be doing.
Yes. And also, if you are at Second-Year High School on Saturday and you see us just kind of walking around, please say hello.
Yeah.
I love talking to you guys. I love getting to know you guys. And I really want this podcast to be a space that you guys feel like your questions are getting answered because we know you don't get to see that much. So if you have questions, ask us, tweet us, all that kind of stuff. We're kind of everywhere. And if you see us, just give us a nice little wave.
Absolutely. I would
yell Tori's name.
Tori! Yeah, just scream my name and I will literally, I may just like pee myself.
Or call her Victoria.
You're right, yeah.
She'll be easy to spot. She'll have the notebook balanced on her head.
On my head, yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely that's a part that we miss without the fans here. So yeah, let us know. But again, thank you guys so much for listening to Falcons Final Whistle, which is presented by Zaxby's. Tori McElhaney, Amna, Subhan, I'm Will McFadden. We will see you guys tomorrow.